Thank you for joining me today. You were tracking environment bills this session. What passed that you're happy about this year?
Well, some of our biggest, the things we're really glad about in terms of environmental legislation that passed, the bills that crossed the finish line were like SB 84, Community Solar, which is a bill that would increase accessibility of solar energy, especially for low-income communities. And community solar is something that Yucca, our organization, has been calling for about the 2 years that we've existed. So it's really been wonderful to see that passed. Also, Senate Bill 112, or SB 112, the Sustainable Economies Act, and SB 8A, Local Government Air and Quality Regulations, and then House Bill 51, Environmental Database, were some of our kind of like additional bills. I don't want to say that we claim any kind of leadership with that passage, but we were really glad to see those pass.
Yeah. What about bills that did not pass this year that you're disappointed about, and why do you think some of those didn't make it through the session this year?
We saw a lot of important legislation go unscheduled or killed in committees. And we basically saw that oil and gas utility lobby had interests prioritized over the needs of New Mexicans. Proposals that would have reined in extraction or shifted our energy system in significant ways were all killed, including SJR3, the Environmental Rights Amendment, or the Green Amendment, SB 84, Local Choice Energy, SB 86, Use for Oil and Gas Operations, aka Produced Water Regulations. And once I'm done making this list, I'm going to talk to you a little bit specifically about that one. SB 149, Prohibit New Fracking Licenses, HB 50, Private Right of Action for Certain Statutes, and HB 9, Climate Solutions Act. So these are all bills that would have started to do the work to curb carbon emissions in the state of New Mexico and tackle the fact that we have within our borders one of the largest oil fields on the planet, and we have a regulatory obligation to the rest of the planet, right? And those bills were all kind of unceremoniously killed or just never read in committee, despite being filed often far ahead of other bills that were read, right? You can look at the Green Amendment that arrived at Judiciary very early in the session and was never heard while in that committee.
Many youth activists, including with Yucca, are not eligible to vote, and yet
Yeah.
lawmakers, the public, we're taking action or not taking action on issues that affect your generation most of all. What do you wish that lawmakers and the public better understood about climate change and the urgency of New Mexicans acting on climate change, for example?
Yes. So one thing that I'll say in terms of that age gap, I'm 18, I can vote. There's a lot of people who work with me who know more than me, who are very intelligent people, who are 16 and 17, who know about these issues, can't vote. To remedy that, we actually supported in coalition the 16 vote bill, later changed to the 17 vote bill because it was amended in committee, that would have allowed 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds the right to vote in state elections, right? That's the most immediate solution to that. If you want to respect our interests, give us a chance to represent them in the electoral process. The last time we changed the election age, right, nationally, was in light of the Vietnam War, when you had people being drafted in the military who couldn't vote for the people who were drafting them into the military. That contradiction needed to be resolved. At the same time, right now, you have 16 and 17-year-olds who will experience the single worst damages of climate change, unable to vote on the people choosing whether or not to shorten their lifespans. That's an incredible contradiction that needed to be resolved. It unfortunately wasn't resolved this session, and we'll be back next time to make sure that it is. Aside from that, aside from just the very simple solution of let us vote, what people I think need to understand, for young people, the scale of the crisis is very large. And I think there were definitely elders in our communities, other folks in our communities who understand it. But even when I talk to people younger than myself, it's even larger for them, right? I'm scared that I may never be able to live past 50, right? There's people 10 years younger than me scared that they're never going to be able to live past 40. The fear becomes deeper and deeper as you get younger because your lifespan gets shorter and shorter. And I think part of what we have to understand is that climate change is not something that can be dealt with soon. It is something that has to be dealt with now, right? We are not looking for, we do not need to be, we talk about goals in the future, right? We talk about carbon neutrality by 2050. We talk about these ideas. And there were bills even in the session that sought to do that. And those are good, valuable things. But I also think that because we talk about these things in big timelines, it becomes easy to comprehend climate change as something that is going to happen and something that will cost. That's not true. It is happening. It has already cost human lives. And action needs to be taken by the time I finish saying this sentence.
Right. I know that it's early to be talking about next session, but what do you hope lawmakers start working on right now ahead of next year's session?
Yeah, I'd really love to see 16 and 17 vote bill. I think we gained some traction this year. I think also what needs to be dealt with is the ways that that undemocratically a lot of bills are killed in committee, right? You can look at what happened in judiciary, where you had literally hundreds of bills in committee. The Green Amendment, one of our primary priority bills, arrived to judiciary early in the session. It wasn't heard, right? Throughout the rest of the session, there was obviously favoritism being played there. At the same time that the chair of that committee, received some of the most oil and gas money of any politician in the state. I don't see that as coincidental. It feels just too linear a series of events to be coincidental. That the place where so many environmental bills and other, good bills are being stopgapped is also the committee most controlled by private industry. And so that has nothing to do with democracy. That has nothing to do with votes. That has nothing to do with representation. And it's holding back our democratic electoral process in New Mexico. And work needs to be done by lawmakers and people outside of the lawmaking system to change that. On another level, I think what needed to happen this session and what needs even more to happen next session is strong regulation of the oil and gas industry. We need to make sure that radioactive waste fluid isn't being considered water in the state of New Mexico. We need to make sure that regulations are put in place that will reduce the amount of carbon emissions out of the Permian Basin in the next 10 to 15 years. That needs to happen now if the human species is going to continue. And the state of New Mexico has an obligation not just to its citizens, but to the entire human race to not continue to be such a massive part of global carbon emissions.
Thank you so much for joining me, and I really appreciate the work that you do.
I'm really glad I could join you too. Thank you for having me. And thank you for letting me talk a little bit about this work.